Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Again, Faith Conling, Legislative Representative for CSAC. I do cover employee relations and administrative services issues, which also includes Open Data Public Records Act and the Brown Act, which SB 272 very purposefully was placed into the Public Records Act last year when it was signed by Governor Brown. And I titled this slideshow, What Just Happened, because I think that a lot of local governments are in that position of wondering how to comply with SB 272 by the July 1st deadline and how other local agencies are doing it. So I'm just here to provide a very brief overview of the bill. SB 272 was signed by the governor last year. It was by Senator Hertzberg, and it requires local agencies to create a catalog of enterprise systems and then post it on their website. It started out as a very broad bill when it was first introduced to require all local agencies to create an inventory of data. Obviously, CSAC had a minor panic attack along with other local agencies, and we worked very hard to narrow the bill to what it is today. Why SB 272? We're actually still trying to figure that out. Privacy advocates actually lauded SB 272 as allowing for greater accountability and transparency regarding types of information collected about the public. The legislature's intent for SB 272 was to help local agencies gain operational efficiency and increase collaboration by allowing online access to public sector data. We aren't quite sure if SB 272 actually does either of those things, but despite all that, it's now in law, and it's going to be law from here on out, and you're going to have to comply as of July 1st. Once SB 272 goes into effect, CSAC is going to work with other local agencies as well as legal counsels to start developing guidelines on what counties are including and what they are believing is exempt from their SB 272 catalog. So moving forward, you will hear more from CSAC on guidelines as to what to include. But that first compliance date is July 1st, so mark that in red on your Outlook calendar. Now how? Rather than me as a lobbyist trying to give you an explanation of how to implement this new law, CSAC brought you a couple of experts in the area, and Jeff has already introduced them. Most Streamline work, I will say, Sloan is with Streamline, is with the California Special Districts Association. CSAC has utilized Sloan and Streamline as more open data laws come down the tubes of things that we have to post online and how to comply with technology on our websites. We've utilized Streamline for their technical expertise to make sure that as the bills go through the process, they're getting amended to make it easier on local governments to administratively apply at costs that are acceptable. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sloan.
Okay, so as they said, I'm Sloan, and I'm with Streamline, and we've been busy building website tools for local government to help with online compliance. And we were happily doing that when SB 272 came along, and surprise, we switched gears to do a little work on that. So we have a free tool that we've built, and part of the reason that I've been invited to talk about it is because in building a compliance tool, you really have to work your way through the law. So that's what we've been doing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Faith already talked about what SB 272 is. I just like to point out that local government needs to comply, but state agencies do not. And the legislature doesn't either. So the thing that can get confusing about this is that it's because it was tucked at the end of the Public Records Act. You know, it would seem that they have the same kind of requirements, but something that's important to understand is that data that you may not give someone for a PRA request might still need to be included. The system that holds that data might still need to be included in your catalog because the system itself might be safe enough to list, even though the data in it you would never share with the public. So an example of that would be customer contact information, which you may not ever turn over to a PRA request, but the system that saves that data may end up being required in your catalog. And there's usually a lot of questions about this, so we'll see what comes up by the end. Again, who has to comply? Anybody who's a local agency with the exemption of school districts. Yeah, sorry, I'm beating a dead horse with the state agency thing. Yeah. sorry, a little frustrated. So, but it doesn't matter whether you have a website or not. And I know with counties have websites. The special districts really struggle in this area. So it doesn't matter if you have a website, you still need to comply. It doesn't even matter if you have computers or not, which probably seems really silly to counties, but for special districts like very small cemetery districts, some of them simply don't have computers and still need to create a catalog that says we don't have any systems. So basically, if you're not a school district and you're considered local government, you have to do this. And I'm sorry. So the bill text, and the reason I put this slide before the actual determination of whether or not something is considered an enterprise system is because I just wanted to give everyone an idea of what actually has to be listed. So again, the important point here is that it's not the content of the systems itself, but for each computer system that is considered an enterprise system, you need to list these 7 things. So we'll look at what a couple of listings look like. This is out of the tool that we have. The County of Humboldt uses it, and they've listed a few of their systems in here. And it's a little fuzzy, but you can see that there are just those certain things that need to be listed. So it's not exposing the data itself. It's just a listing. So how do you determine if it's an enterprise system? This is where most of our questions come up. This is a little bit confusing because it's a both and an or and an and. So, it needs to be both A and B. So what that means, if we actually start with B, which is a little simpler, it needs to be a system of record. And if it isn't a system of record, you do not have to include it in your catalog. Now, a system of record is a system that serves as an original source of data within an agency. So, for example, if you use an email system, say Constant Contact, for example, to send out updates, but you don't ever update the original data in that system, so you keep all of your contacts elsewhere in a different system, then that probably is not considered a system of record, in which case it then does not need to be included. Now, if we look at A, so if you decided it's a system of record already, and then we look at the first requirement, where there has to be multi-departmental or something that contains information about the public. And this is a little tricky in my mind because, first of all, multi-departmental, we have been told by the attorneys that even if you don't have multiple departments, you should consider all systems multi-departmental because you're switching hats. Again, this isn't as applicable to counties as it is to special districts. And then the second thing is that almost every computer system that an agency has contains information collected about the public. So one of the things we talked about amongst ourselves as we're trying to figure this out is, how do you know for sure what needs to be included and what doesn't? And we'll talk a little more about that. But our feeling is that you should really err on the side of safety. And if there's no good reason not to include it and you don't feel like you can actually justify an exemption and you're kind of thinking it might need to be included, go ahead and include it. One of the things we talk about a lot is Microsoft Office Suite. So many agencies think, well, I need to include Outlook because Outlook is the original source of emails, right? The emails that everyone sends. And we're so used to PRA requests saying, give me all of your emails around this certain subject. So that might need to be included, but what about Word? Well, if Word is where you create your agendas, and that's where you go update your agenda before you create a PDF, then the suggestion is, yeah, you probably need to include it. And you can kind of split hairs about this all day long, but the easiest thing to do is just to list the Microsoft Office suite and then go ahead and fill out all the other fields and kind of keep it broad. That's our suggestion. So thanks to Faith and Dylan over at CSDA and some other people who worked very hard to make this manageable. There are some exemptions. It was a very, very scary bill when it was first presented. So this is a list of the exemptions. They did put some exemptions in for anything that could be considered dangerous to share. So physical access control systems or systems that might control water flow to a community or things like that. 911, emergency services, that kind of stuff. Now the thing that's interesting is if you look at F, that's important. The specific records that the system collects are not required to be included. So this isn't about the records, it's about the system. Now everything we're hearing is that the next step, this is step 1, in a push to get access to data. So, step 2 may show up next year, but so far, the actual records don't have to be included. Now, if disclosure would reveal vulnerabilities to you, you feel like it is dangerous, then you can use the E, section 6254.19. And the free tool that we built actually walks you through this and gives you information on each system if you're interested. So I just felt like Faith that I needed to every time I talk in person, what comes up here is why the heck. So I thought I'd include this slide. It is just a copy and paste from the law text itself, justifying the reason for it. So here's my disclaimer. I think part of the reason I get invited to these things is because I'm willing to have an opinion on what should be included. A lot of the attorneys, an opinion is a pretty serious thing, and so you talk to legal counsel and they're very cautious about having opinions, but I would say that I may know a lot more about this law than a lot of people, and I'm willing to make a best guess at what needs to be included. I would suggest that, again, if it's safe enough to include, simply include it. My guess is that anyone who's really making a solid attempt to comply is not going to be able to really get themselves in trouble. I also have a very strong feeling that we aren't going to really understand exactly what does and doesn't need to be included until somebody gets sued and it's decided in the courts. So it can be a little confusing. At the beginning, it says it needs to be a system that collects, stores, exchanges, and analyzes information. So now you can look at Microsoft Word and say, well, okay, so does it collect? Well, kind of, because I'm making it. And does it store? Well, it saves. Does it exchange? Well, I don't know, maybe if I use a mail merge with it, it exchanges. And it analyzes information. So I don't know, does a word count as analyze? It's just kind of hard. But the thing that is important is that later in the law, it uses the word or. So like I said, I wouldn't get too specific about whether or not it does all four things. I would just suggest to err on the side of included if it's not clearly exempted. So there are a lot of ways to do this. I have a couple of examples. Basically, we've got some cities and some counties who are using our tool, and our tool is free. It's free forever because this is kind of a frustrating thing for all of you to have to do. So we created a free tool that's easy to use, and it creates listings and walks you through all of the steps with simple yes/no questions to help you determine whether or not something is considered an enterprise system. City of Santa Clarita is using a spreadsheet that they basically put up on their website. The city of Stockton created a very colorful PDF, which they include too. And I have a ton of examples. So if you're wondering what this looks like for people and how different agencies are complying, I've got a lot of examples. Here's one of the things that I'm finding is the most important thing about SB 272 is that so few people have heard of it. I'm always really frightened when I'm the person telling them because I'm not always moving in these circles. I know that Faith has been working very hard and Dylan over at CSDA has been working very hard to let agencies know, but it's surprising how many times I talk to someone and they haven't even heard of it. So again, our tool is free, but not the only way. But the full text of the bill is available online, and you can even get that simply by doing a Google search for SB 272 bill text. And then we have a lot of information on SB 272 on our website. I think because we aren't involved in the negotiations back and forth with the legislature, we're able to write about these things in a little different way. So there's a lot of in-depth information and FAQs and lots of opinions on how this stuff works. And if you know anyone who needs to comply with this and they don't know about this yet, please make sure to let them know that they can come sign up for an additional webinar on our website. The webinars don't cost anything, the tool doesn't cost anything, and we just need to make sure that we really get the word out so that, if there's an agency who has a disgruntled citizen or ex-board member or just something, those situations, or sometimes the local paper, those situations where people are coming to look at you to see if you're complying, you want to make sure that everyone is doing that. One of the other things that's interesting about this being tucked into the Public Records Act, and something really important to remember, is that the Public Records Act is kind of an on-demand thing. So you need to comply with the request when someone shows up and asks, could I have this information? And I think we're all familiar with how that works. SB 272, if you go look at the Public Records Act now, it's tucked on the bottom, kind of like the redheaded stepchild. I don't dislike redheads, by the way. So it's tucked right on the bottom, and it's a little different than everything else, and it has its own rules. Not just that you don't have to list the actual data, but the other thing is that it has to be updated annually. So one of the things, and it doesn't say every July 1st. It doesn't say if you're on a fiscal, it needs to be every whatever. It doesn't say 12 months after your first catalog. It just says annually. So you want to make sure to do that. And so one of the things we really suggest that you do is that you keep track of the systems that you feel are exempt even if you're not going to list them in your actual public catalog that people see, maybe there's a security exemption, or maybe there's some other reason you feel like it shouldn't be included in the public catalog, we suggest that you keep track of those anyway, because you're going to have to look at this again year after year from here on out. So you don't want to have to recreate every year all the questions that you went through to try and figure out if something actually was exempt or not.
Good afternoon. My name is Premdeep Dhanoa. I'm with the County of Santa Clara. I'd like to begin by thanking CSAC for inviting me to be a presenter at the webinar, and I'd like to thank you all for attending. I'll be walking you through the process that was followed at the County of Santa Clara on how we'll be compliant with the SB 272 process. So the county became aware of SB 272 last October, which I think was pretty much the time around it was enacted. And there were two sources. Our county council became aware of it, and we also learned on the IT side from SISTA. And since this was going to be a IT related effort, so the responsibility, from management was given to the CIO. CIO passed it on to his PMO, the Project Portfolio Management Office. The county the CIO PMO is led by Vijay Kumar. He's my boss. I report to him, and he assigned me to take on the effort, so that's how I'm here today. I don't have a legal background, and until about a year and a half ago, I didn't even know what CPRA was. I'm new to the public sector. I come from the private sector, but I guess my specialization is I take on whatever I'm asked to do and go tackle it. So I began by reading the law, reading up on CPRA, and talking with internal stakeholders. And we crafted a communication that was sent out in late March about what we were asking the various departments and agencies to do, what data we were asking of them, and why we were asking for the data. And we gave them 4 weeks to return the data. We had to send a reminder again in May for the straggler departments. So on this slide, I have a snippet of the operative part of the email. This is what we told the departments to do, what data they were to give us. So they were to give us data about systems that are in their department or agency that contain data about the public and are the original source of data. And we gave them the list of the criteria they would need to follow if that allowed them not to list any particular system. And this is a snippet of the template that we attached to the email. So the email was sent out by the CIO to all the department and agency heads. It's a bare bones template, lists the 7 columns that the bill is asking for. We did give them one sample record so that the departments would get a feel for what data they had to provide. Between the email and the template, you will notice that we did not make any effort to define every element of the communication. We left it to the departments to come back and ask us questions. We thought that would be a better approach, and it kind of panned out that way. So on the next slide, I have the main questions that were asked by the departments. So the questions were, who gets to decide what systems to list? We told the department it was their call. They make the call on what to list, but the list that they send over will be curated by the security department within the IS department, and they would get the final call if they wanted to take out any particular system, if it impinged on any security aspect of IS systems. Do all enterprise systems have to be listed? No, there was only the system that contained public data about the public, and are the primary source of data, the original source of data. So they only had to list systems that intake the data, but they don't have to list data systems from which the data would flow out from the main system. So if the data flows out to a secondary system for reporting or to a tertiary system for archiving, they don't have to list it. They just need to list the main intake system. Questions came in asking, we have an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, do we have to list those? We told them, this is not an exercise in discovery of every little document that contains public data. The Word document, the Excel spreadsheet is probably part of a larger system. List that system. If you have a Word or Excel spreadsheet that's all by itself, list it. What types of data have to be listed? So we had given them a sample in the spreadsheet itself. Just list whatever data you have. Name, addresses, age, bank account numbers, whatever you have in there. Just list it in free form, separated by commas. And the last question, what is an original source of data, which I've answered earlier. With the original source system is one that intakes the data. We don't need to list systems from which the data flows from the original system to the other systems. Once we sent out the communication, there were two paths the departments followed to get the data back to the IT department. The email that we sent asked the departments to send the data back to me, so I got emails with their data in the spreadsheet attached to the email. And also, we have a division within ISD called the Business Relationship Management Division. So they did an outreach to the departments. So they went ahead and to the department that they serve. And they collected all the data in a spreadsheet and they gave it to me. And at the end, I matched up both sides. Some departments may have given data to me as well as to the BRM team, so I removed the duplicates. Once I had the catalog ready, I gave it to our security team. So they went through the catalog. They made whatever changes they thought would be necessary. Primarily, perhaps they maybe took out a system or two that they didn't want published, maybe impinged on security of the IS systems. After I got the catalog back from security, I forwarded it to our county council office, and they are currently working with management to give me the approval to publish the catalog. And we're almost there. One of the lines in the bill says the catalog shall be made available in the office of the person designated by the agency's legislative body. So our county council instructed me to get a resolution prepared and passed by the Board of Supervisors. So that resolution was submitted just yesterday. The Board of Supervisors meeting is on June 21st. Hopefully it'll be approved there. And once that happens, the catalog will be published by our SharePoint team on the county public website. Since ISD will be the designated department to publish the data, post it, we plan to use the ISD section of the public website to simply upload the spreadsheet on a web page. We will make it an annual renewal kind of exercise, and I guess the responsibility will lie with the PMO office. So, thank you very much.
So we have a number of questions from the audience for our presenters. So we'll just start at the top. If a system that analyzes information must be included, does that include a data mining application that creates predictive reports?
So a data mining application that creates predictive reports. So I'm thinking back to that. Is it a system of record? So if it's mining the data, that part of it says no. But if it's creating predictive reports, then those reports themselves, that is a system of record. Mm-hmm. So back to what I had said before, I would say yes, unless there's another good reason not to list it.
What about payroll systems, which some might be concerned would be, there might be certain dangers in listing on this report? They're thinking of OPM.
Sure. Santa Clara County is shaking its head that they did not include it. And I would refer back to the balancing test under the Public Records Act, Government Code Section 6254. If posting that information, the balance between posting it for transparency purposes does not balance with the effect that it might have on the public, then that balancing test can be used in SB 272 compliance. And I would probably not post it if your legal counsel determines that posting such information would harm the public more than help it.
Yeah, and just keep a list of those exemptions and refer to why you exempted them, and then you're going to be safe in the sense that you did vet it. Right?
Mhm.
We have a number of people asking for the PowerPoint slides, so apparently they find it useful, and we will be posting those on our website, and we can include them also in an email to all of the registrants to the webinar. A follow-up on the last question though, how is the benefit of listing versus the risk of listing determined and weighed?
Good luck. No.
Well, I think the question is how you would do that at the county level, and honestly, that's going to be a county decision. That's unfortunately, like Sloan said before, things probably won't get determined on whether you post them until litigation happens. And I think at the county level, bringing in your county counsel to determine whether that balancing test would indeed apply, it's going to have to be locally determined.
Yeah, and I would also just offer a word of caution. We've had a few special districts through CSDA say they were told they didn't have to comply by their county council because they were too small, and that's just not true. It doesn't matter how small you are, it doesn't matter how rural you are, it doesn't matter how many systems you have.
Right.
It just doesn't matter, everyone has to comply.
Right. Good point.
And what are the possible penalties for not complying?
I think they get to make them up.
Yeah, well, that wasn't
Sorry.
included in the bill. I
Did
mean,
I say that
basically,
wrong?
since it's in the Public Records Act, it's any penalties that would apply as to any other violation of the Public Records Act. Litigation, I think, having to provide the information when somebody asks could prevent possible litigation, but generally right now, no specific penalties for lack of SB2 compliance have been put into effect, and I'm sure that will most likely be changing. They just forgot that part, and we didn't bring it up.
Are cloud-based systems and network vendors exempt based on the section 6254.19 exemptions?
I wouldn't say blanket, no. I wouldn't say that they are blanketly exempted. I think you'd have to look at each system and see if there's a specific security risk.
Well, a couple of people on the webinar also asked about state systems. Are the state systems that local agencies use, should they be listed? And one example was the CalWIN system, which counties contribute data to. It's a state system, but counties contribute data to it. And there are other systems that counties don't contribute data to that they use that are state systems.
Yeah, it isn't their system of record, so they don't have to list it. That's my opinion.
I would agree with that.
If it belongs to the state, then when the state passes a law that affects them, it would have to be listed by
On the
the state.
10th of never, when the state has to comply with this, that's when we do it.
Right, so no, that wouldn't have to be listed.
The shortest question we got was community colleges.
Mm-mm. No.
No educational institutions were harmed in the making of this bill.
So one county is considering putting a disclaimer on their list, since as a billboard that the public can't access some of the data that's referenced in the report. They're torn because they don't want to give a false expectation that data is available, but they also don't want to give the appearance of the list being a here it is, but you can't have any of it. Do you have any opinion on the benefit or of using or not using a disclaimer like that?
Right, I have an opinion on everything. So I would suggest that it would actually be kind of a kindness to your visitors to craft a very nice paragraph that explains the requirements of this and the differences between this and the original PRA, so that people understand that they're actually getting access to different things and why. And why they may not be able to offer the data that's included in some of the systems that are listed. I think that's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
And I actually want to step back one thing, because I just realized I did some research on community colleges, and in reading the Public Records Act, what they called local education agencies was up through 12. So we might want to double check and follow up.
I'm pretty sure all educational agencies are exempt, but we can follow up and definitely re-answer that question if that's changed.
So similar to the question about state systems, what about systems used by the agency, but for which the agency is not the primary agency? If it's not just a multi-departmental system, but a multi-agency system.
That's interesting. So I guess technically, if it isn't your own enterprise system, maybe you don't need to list it. If there's no reason not to, again, I think I would list it.
I think that would need to be a locally made decision. I don't see why you would, but to err on the side of caution.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Good
Uh,
questions.
So what about section 6253.1 or .10? I'm not sure
Point
which.
10. Yeah, it's point 10.
It's about open data web pages, which seem to this questioner to be a much more onerous requirement. Why is nobody talking about that?
Well, I don't know that nobody is talking about it. We just haven't had a webinar yet. This was AB 169 from last year, which said, hey, if you call something open data, here are the requirements that you need to follow to continue calling it open data in this state. I believe it needs to be machine readable, downloadable, retrievable, and a whole host of other things that
Searchable,
simply makes it
indexable.
easier for people to grab information when they need it. I wouldn't say we're not talking about it. On those kind of bills, we do strive to get any kind of compliance date put out far enough that counties and other local agencies will have time to comply. It's the way that technology is moving forward, and unfortunately we have to move forward with it. So
Yeah.
there will be more of those kinds of bills coming down the line here soon. Like I said, SB 272 is just the start. Right now we have AB 2257 going through, which would require us to post certain agendas on our homepage instead of only on other pages. There's a bill that's going to require us to post all of our employee comp on our homepage. And all of those links have to link to a document that's abides by 6253.10. So this is just the beginning. It's definitely worth a bigger conversation, and I'd be happy to look into working with counties to have that conversation.
There were a few people that asked questions about systems that are purchased but not yet deployed, or that are in the process of being implemented, or that will go live soon. Do those sorts of systems, do they need to be listed?
I would suggest if you haven't put any public data in it yet, the answer would be no.
No.
If you're using it to track public data already, you're maybe not live yet, but you're in the process and you are using that as your system of record. So if it's something brand new and not replacing your other system of record, then I would say yes.
Right. Well, and this can be a moving document too. It says it has to be updated annually, but as you add systems, lose systems, it's a moving document that you can update as often as you want. So I would not see a problem with not including it, and then when the system does go live, adding it to your SB 272 compliance.
The one person says that this seems very much like an unfunded mandate and wonders if they can avoid compliance on that basis.
Well, thanks to Proposition 42 from 2014, it is an unfunded mandate. We are no longer able to get reimbursed for Brown Act and Public Records Act compliance. So you do have to comply, you just have to pay for it yourself.
Yeah, and that's the trend we're seeing too, just by the way, because I work in this space a lot, and of course these guys, talking to these guys all the time, but this is the trend we're seeing. 2257 this year that is now in the Senate, passed the Assembly with flying colors, that would require the agenda of the main body to be on the homepage, in machine readable format. which isn't defined, which is kind of frightening because then you go back to what's the actual definition of this, and it's all kind of a big hot mess. That will get tucked into the Brown Act. So again, no funding for that, no matter what the expense is. And this is the trend we're seeing. The states get their own budget, and I'm sure they have their own reasons, and all they need to do is tuck into one of these two acts, and then you're stuck.
With the bill.
Yes.
So somebody has a question about the fact that a system has to be both a system of record and an enterprise system. Can you clarify if it is a system of record or an enterprise system? And I think a separate question, when you mentioned the data mining application reports, if the reports are not stored in the application, would that still need to be included?
Yeah, so part of knowing if something is an enterprise system is whether or not it's a system of record. So it's not one or the other, it's if it's a system of record and then meets the other criteria, then it is considered an enterprise system. So hopefully that clarifies that. And then in terms of data mining and reports, system of record is the original source of data. So if these reports are temporary, if they're a conglomeration of other information and you don't consider that an original source of data, then I think you just exempt it and keep a note as to why you chose to do that. Best guess, by the way.
Yeah.
The questions might start getting more specific. Housing authorities are
This webinar
established.
has ended. Thank you.
Housing authorities are established through the state health and safety code, but are not a state agency. Are they then a local agency required to comply?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Housing authorities
Yeah.
are established through the health and safety code, but are not a state agency. Does that therefore make them a local agency that is required to comply?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think what I keep doing, because the only context we have is the Public Records Act, so what I keep doing is looking back against the Public Records Act, the original part of it, and that's where I would look for that answer is, does the Public Records Act apply to you? And SB 272 did not give you a specific exemption, as like an education agency, then my guess would be, yeah.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Sorry, I'm just gonna keep apologizing. Sorry.
Do you recommend listing vendor names or using system identification model?
You can only use the identification model if you feel that it's dangerous to list the vendor name. So I would suggest that, everyone's gonna have to make their own decision. I mean, the joke at our office is that Microsoft Office suite might actually be dangerous because we all work on Macs and we don't get viruses, and everybody targets Microsoft with viruses, so maybe that's dangerous and you might be able to justify that, so it's just a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and CSAC worked really hard to try and get rid of the vendor name requirement, and it was a very big sticking point that we ended up losing on in the end. So there was no lack of effort to try and make sure that vendor name was not included.
Where do you think the best place on the county website is to list the catalog?
Well, I have a feeling a bill's going to come that tells you the home pages. Where did Santa Clara put it?
He said he's going to put it in his department section because
In the
they
IT
are the
department
keeper.
section, right.
Designated department.
Yeah.
We'll put it up in that.
Sure,
The
so
bill says prominent.
prominent, that hasn't been defined yet either. I'm waiting for that to come. But generally, this bill is associated with your information services department. That's how it's viewed by the public, and that's how the legislature viewed it as well. So I'm imagining that many local agencies will be placing it on that web page.
Yeah, the only other suggestion is if you do have a section devoted to transparency, since this is being touted as a transparency effort, then maybe that would be a good spot.
Definitely.
Under the law, is ownership of a system a test for whether a system is a system of record?
I would suggest not,
No.
because I'm thinking, like our web tool, it's a subscription based, nobody ever actually owns it, there's no licensing, and yet it still may be able, may need to be listed.
So what is having to do with whether or not the public interest is served by not disclosing the vendor and product name versus the disclosure of the names, or providing a system name, brief title, or identifier of the system? What is needed to prove that posting a system vendor and product name is a security risk?
Yeah, nothing basically. I mean, the law doesn't provide any language around how you actually determine whether or not you can use that workaround. And thanks for getting that in, by the way. So I would just suggest, again, I keep doing this, I keep beating this to death, but I would suggest you just keep a list of everything that you vet and why you decided to make the decision that you made. And our the tool that we built, we actually have a section where it just saves your exempt content so that next time someone else comes in to look at it or add a new system, you can see it's already been vetted. So I would just suggest if you're doing a spreadsheet, maybe you have a public version and an internal version, and you know your internal version has a section that's very clearly, we looked at all of these systems and here's why they're exempt.
Can counties make the claim that the public disclosure of the enterprise systems would compromise the security of the public because we need to spend additional resources to update the frequency of cybersecurity personnel, services, etc.? By placing the information out there, they provide a big target for hackers to create focused cybersecurity threats targeting public information they want for criminal purposes.
You can try. I would denote that that was my main argument in the legislature when this bill was going through, is that this will actually open us up to possible more cyber attacks. And the argument just did not hold water with them, unfortunately. So I imagine it wouldn't hold water at the local level either.
What about systems that house data regarding juveniles? Are they considered under the umbrella of the public? Is that why schools are exempt?
To not list it, is what they're asking. The juvenile records are exempt under the public, under section 830, and then under the Public Records Act. Again, I think going back to Sloan's being specific that the data is not what we're posting here, it's the record that we're using to store the data. I would err on the side of caution and say that it should be listed.
Can you then provide an example or two of when disclosure of the name of a system could create a security risk, or reveal vulnerabilities to, or an increased potential for attack on an IT system?
Maybe you can. Every example I think of comes from my fire service background, and that's all exempt anyway now, so I can never think of something. I haven't. Did you guys run across anywhere you felt like you needed to use placeholder in place of the vendor name?
I can't recall.
Yeah, it's tough.
They don't give you very many, they don't give you abilities to exempt very many of them via the vendor name. So I have not come across any of my counties saying they've chosen to not list a vendor name unless it's already exempt within the bill.
So a couple here for Santa Clara County. Why did Santa Clara County obtain a board resolution, and what part of the bill required that?
So our county council's opinion was that there's a particular line in the bill that says the posting shall be available in the office of a person designated by the legislative body. Sorry, I'm not a legal guy.
No,
so
you're right on.
that was the basis for county council to tell me that we need to have a resolution approved by the board.
There's nothing in the bill that requires a board resolution or a governing body resolution to comply with SB 272. But many counties are doing with what Santa Clara is doing.
Besides 911 systems, what other types of law enforcement systems did Santa Clara not include?
I would not be able to give an example, sorry.
Yeah, well,
Because
I
you'd be
can give
disclosing
it.
it.
I know, right? Don't share. I can give some broad examples, however. So, really anything related to emergency services is exempt. So if you look at that list of exemptions, and I don't have the slide up now, and we'll send you all of that. And it's also in the bill text, so again, you can go look it up. But in that list of exemptions, it's pretty broad. You guys did a great job of getting kind of that entire umbrella covered. Now, I don't know if anything that wouldn't be considered secure, there probably are systems that police and fire may use. I know my fire district uses some systems they can list, but a lot of them are exempt. Are there, oh, sorry, wrong question. 1 second.
Have you created a decision tree using the requirements to determine what can be excluded and what will be disclosed?
That decision tree.
That's what our tool is.
No.
It is one big decision
Yeah.
tree. You
It's
just go
almost
step by
like
step.
a pick your own adventure book. The
For
streamline
SB 272.
for SB 272 compliance, the tool will basically take you step by step. The system is a multi-departmental. If not, go to page 15. If it is, go to page 2. Your life starts here. It's that kind of system. So yeah, it's a decision tree. It's incredibly helpful.
How can counties support CSAC on some of the legislative input, these initiatives that are moving toward having their home pages consumed by agendas and open data publications?
That's a great question
I
that I
love
feel
you,
was
whoever asked
plugged
that.
by maybe one of my staff
Oh.
here. But if it wasn't, so obviously this is kind of a new area that we're wading into. We utilize Streamline right now to give us kind of some technical expertise. We're working with CSISDA, it's the California County Information Services Directors Association. We are going to establish a strong relationship with them so that counties are becoming alerted to these bills in a much faster manner. And the way that you can help is by the CSAC bulletin. We list out bills that are going through the process. We have bill tracking on our website. Take a look at those bills that we send out that we need requests for feedback on, or if your county finds something that maybe we haven't seen yet pop up in the legislature, contact me, contact CSAC, let us know what your concerns are. And if you have a contract lobbyist and you feel that it should be elevated to that level, have your contract lobbyist work with us as well to either get the bill amended or kill it altogether. SB 272 was an effort that it started with local government, it expanded to local, to law enforcement associations, CSISDA, MESAC, which is City Information Directors. It turned into this huge broad coalition of stakeholders, and having individual counties help out by giving us expertise from the county on how this would affect them would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and just one other small thing, you can also sign up on our website for our newsletter, and it's not regular or anything else, and you're very unlikely to get spammed because I'm super busy, but we're watching things like this all the time, so sometimes CSAC's looking very closely at something, sometimes CSDA is looking very closely at something, and we're looking at all of it because it all affects us. And also so much of this, I apologize, comes from the public sector looking for things they need, and they're forcing this on local government. Again, apologies, it wasn't us. But that's not going to stop happening. So we're watching it pretty closely, and you're welcome to sign up on our website.
Two more quick questions, and we're running over our time a little, so we'll cut it off there. One is, if a system was developed in-house, so there was no vendor or product involved, is not applicable an acceptable response to those fields? How are you handling
We
it?
had a situation like that, so we listed it as developed in-house.
Yes.
You listed it as Santa Clara County as the vendor. So I will end with a delightful question that maybe goes to how circular this law can become. If somebody builds a system to comply, do you have to list that system in the system you just built?
Yes,
Yes, you do.
you do. You do.
Can you imagine why it would
Right
be exempt?
Yes.
Well, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, and thank you to our presenters for sharing their expertise with us today. A recording of the webinar and the slide presentations will be available on our website, www.counties.org, in the next week, and we will make sure that all of those attending the webinar are notified when that is available. So again, thank you everyone.
Thanks.